you're the star of the show, but your co-star is the Koopman Operator. So do you want to give us a little description of the Koopman Operator? Because it's impossible to look up Igor without finding the Koopman Operator. It's an area he's been focused on, as we've been discussing. But let's start to try to put some definition around what it is and how it operates.
Okay, let me start with the fact that about 100 years ago, there was a huge revolution in science where quantum theory was discovered. And the idea was that people were measuring these various spectral components in atomic processes. And you couldn't really observe the positions and velocity and the momenta of these atoms, but you could talk about observables that are the spectral components. And so Heisenberg said, I need a theory that's going to tell me about those spectral components. I can't really measure positions and velocities. And he developed a theory that is structurally very much what is called an operator theoretic perspective on that process. He basically says, what I'm observing is really not a mathematical function. It's an operator. It's really something more abstract. So Koopman understood this and said, hey, if I have a classical mechanics problem, and he worked on these classical Newtonian aspects, couldn't I do the same thing? And he said, here's an operator that could potentially do that. It could take a state of the system at time t to the state of the system at time t plus delta t, sometimes later. You can think of it as a big matrix that just takes the state of the system at time t and ports it to some later time. Now, that sounds more complicated than, hey, mass times acceleration is equal to force, but it really isn't, and it's more powerful because acceleration is the second derivative of position, and a position is the state that somebody told you should worry about the state, right? The position. If you think about it for a second, what is the most used physical term in this universe? Energy. Hasn't anything to do with a state. It's actually composed of the observable that's a momentum and an observable that is a potential, which is a function of state. So it's not the state. It's some observation on the state that we call energy, and we have TV programs on it all the time because it's very important to us. The point that I'm trying to make is if somebody gives you data, they might not give you the data in the best possible format. Figuring out the position is a great thing if you're designing an airline path from LA to New York. But you're actually, if you're United Airlines, you're more interested in how much energy that airliner is going to spend because that actually affects your bottom line. So that was the original thought that Koopman had. Why don't we design something very similar to what Heisenberg had said in quantum mechanics, and I'll deal with the variables that are either available or important. And so he designed a formalism that is this operator theoretic formalism that takes concepts like energy from one time to another via operator means. And then von Neumann famously picked up on this. Von Neumann is much more, I think in general terms, much more famous than Bernard Koopman, who was a mathematician at Columbia. And then they worked together. And then that particular theory was put aside for a while because it was used a little bit in physics, but quantum theory dominated, and they didn't go back to quantum theory, understanding quantum theory from this perspective. So I started thinking about this during my PhD thesis, and I found a good use for it because we were interested in understanding mixing in fluid flows. And sometimes in mixing, you have domains that don't mix very well. This could be either good or bad. If you want a good mixture of various things, then it's bad. If you don't want a certain pollutant to cross across a certain boundary, then it's obviously mixing would be a bad thing, and the existence of separate domains would be a good thing. So I used it to visualize those domains because I could find observables that could separate these components very well. I said, oh, this is useful, but it wasn't developed for things like jet engines because there is dissipation and crazy stuff like turbulence going on and things like that. So then the jet engine story comes into the picture, and I started thinking, this is really useful. And then I focused all my efforts on systems with high dimension because I figured out it works. In jet engines, the jet engine dynamics is very high dimensional. So that's a little bit of a history how Koopman came to the idea of the operator, and then how that became useful in a data-driven context that obviously Koopman didn't think about because it was not a thing.
So basically, you're the one who took Koopman out of the closet and dusted it off. It was still out there, but it looks like it's certainly being applied more since your engagement on it.
there are people that paid attention, especially mathematicians in ergodic theory, used it quite a bit from the perspective of pure mathematics. There are also people in physics that were using it in a variety of different contexts. But okay, if I'm to take the credit, yeah, I think that the aspects of data-driven that I think I understood pretty early is a potential. And the connection with things like learning and modeling dynamical systems processes, I don't think that was very well understood, even for myself, before 2004, 2005, really. I guess that's the progression. And then with many collaborators and students and postdocs and people from all over the world, literally, then we collectively push this to be what it is today, which it proves itself to be pretty useful in a variety of contexts.